She's been ground for this since the day she was born.
Military training, 3 languages, a constitutional oath, the full machinery of a 1,000-year-old monarchy built around one job, making sure she becomes queen. But here's what almost nobody talks about. The throne she's been promised isn't actually guaranteed. Not legally, not politically, not even within her own family's recent history. Just 1 generation ago, this same monarchy came within inches of collapsing entirely, and some of the same pressure points that almost broke it then are still sitting there today, waiting. Her name is Leonor. She's the Princess of Asturias, heir to the Spanish crown. And in this video, we're not talking about her training, or her medals, or her uniforms. We're talking about the 4 things that could realistically still get in the way of her ever wearing that crown, starting with the scandal her own grandfather left behind, one she's still quietly cleaning up after. By the end of this, you'll understand why some of the same people cheering Leonormania in the streets of Madrid are the exact same country where, just a few years ago, polls showed more people wanting a republic than a king. Let's start with the man whose shadow she's been standing in her entire life. Leonor was born in 2005, during the reign of her grandfather, King Juan Carlos I, the king credited with steering Spain from dictatorship into democracy, and for decades, one of the most popular monarchs in Europe. Then it fell apart. Starting in the 2010s, Juan Carlos became tangled in one controversy after another: allegations of undisclosed offshore accounts, business dealings tied to Saudi Arabia, and a hunting trip in Botswana taken during the depths of Spain's economic crisis that triggered public outrage. His own daughter, Infanta Cristina, was put on trial in the so-called Neus corruption case. She was ultimately acquitted, but the fallout was severe enough that her brother, King Felipe, formally stripped her of her ducal title in 2015. By 2020, Juan Carlos had left Spain entirely, relocating to Abu Dhabi while investigations into his finances were ongoing. Those investigations were eventually dropped, due to insufficient evidence and expired statutes of limitations, but he never publicly answered the allegations, and he still hasn't returned to live in Spain. Felipe's entire reign since taking the crown in 2014 has essentially been a long, deliberate project to put distance between the monarchy and his father, renouncing his own inheritance from Juan Carlos, introducing a formal code of conduct for the royal family, and very visibly building Leonor's public image as the clean break the institution needed. And that's exactly why her military training, her perfect public appearances, her Leonormania branding, none of that is really about her. It's about repairing 30 years of damage before she even sits on the throne. Which raises an uncomfortable question: what happens if the trust she's been built to restore never fully comes back? Here's a number that rarely makes it into the glossy magazine coverage. In 2022, a Synaptica poll found that 51.6% of Spaniards said they'd prefer Spain become a republic, compared to 34.6% who wanted to keep the monarchy. That's not a fringe opinion, that's a majority, in a country whose entire system of government still runs through the family Leonor is set to lead. It's worth being fair here. Other polls, taken at different points and using different methodologies, have shown majority support for the crown. One survey just a year earlier put support for the monarchy above 55%. Spanish public opinion on this swings hard depending on the news cycle, and it's genuinely contested ground, not a settled fact in either direction. What is settled is this: the Spanish government's own research center stopped publicly rating the monarchy's popularity back in 2015, the year after Felipe took the throne, and the last score it gave Juan Carlos before pulling that data was a 4.34 out of 10. Not exactly a vote of confidence. So Leonor isn't stepping into a guaranteed inheritance. She's stepping into an active, ongoing argument about whether the institution should even exist in its current form, one that flares up every time a new scandal, a new economic squeeze, or a new political crisis hits the country. When Leonor turned 18 in October 2023 and swore her constitutional oath, the ceremony that legally cleared her to take the throne, it was staged as a triumphant, unifying moment. Giant screens went up in Madrid's central square. Streets were decorated with her image. State broadcasters carried it live. But not everyone in that parliament chamber stood and applauded. Politicians from leftist and separatist parties, representing regions like Catalonia and the Basque Country, where independence movements run deep, boycotted the ceremony entirely. Their absence was a pointed, public reminder that Spain isn't one unified country cheering for its future queen. It's a federation of regions with seriously different relationships to the central government, the constitution, and the monarchy that sits at the top of it. That matters more than it sounds like, because the Spanish monarchy isn't just a tradition, it's a constitutional institution that only exists because Spain's regions and political parties agreed to it back in 1978. If that consensus ever seriously frays, through a stronger independence push in Catalonia, a major shift in national politics, or a government that decides the monarchy isn't worth defending anymore, the throne Leonor is training for doesn't just sit there waiting for her. It depends on people choosing, again and again, to keep it. Now here's the part that's almost never mentioned, and it's a strange one. Spain's constitution still technically gives preference to male heirs over female heirs of the same generation, in the rare case where a king has both. It doesn't affect Leonor directly, she's the firstborn child of King Felipe VI, and Felipe and Queen Letizia have no sons, so she inherits the throne outright as the eldest. There's no brother who could legally leapfrog her. But the fact that clause is still sitting in the Constitution, unreformed, has made it a recurring talking point for politicians who want to either modernize the monarchy or abolish it altogether, a built-in symbol of how outdated the institution's legal foundation still is. Reforming it would require amending the Constitution itself, which in Spain is a genuinely difficult, high-threshold process. So for now, it just sits there, irrelevant to Leonor's own succession, but a constant reminder that the rulebook she inherits the crown under hasn't been seriously rewritten in almost 50 years. Put all four of those pieces together, and you get a much more honest picture than the headlines about medals and parachute jumps. Leonor's path to the throne isn't blocked by any single dramatic event. It's exposed, in a few specific places, to things almost entirely outside her control. A renewed financial or personal scandal involving an extended family member could reopen the same wound her grandfather left. A serious enough swing in public opinion, especially if it lines up with a Catalan independence crisis or a national political realignment, could put the institution itself back on the table in a way it hasn't been in decades. And the slow-burning question of whether Spain's 1978 constitutional settlement still reflects what the country wants today never fully goes away, it just gets quieter or louder depending on the decade. None of this means the monarchy is about to fall, and it's worth saying clearly, support for keeping it has, at other points, pulled well above support for a republic. But, born to rule, was never really a guarantee, it's a bet, one Spain keeps replacing every generation, and one that depends on a level of public trust that has to be earned over and over, not just inherited. So when you see Leonor in her dress uniform, smiling for the cameras, remember, every appearance, every medal, every carefully managed headline is part of a decades-long project to make sure the public keeps saying yes to a question Spain never actually stopped asking: does this family still deserve the crown? If you want to understand the other side of that question, hit subscribe. Next time, we're going inside the actual Republican movement trying to end the Spanish monarchy for good, and the politicians leading it.